What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again, and today we have a beefy one. Before writing the intro section of this script, the section of the This Week at Bungie Season 15 weapons update that I wanted to cover was a colossal 3,062-word 10-page document. Meaning that if I quoted everything that Bungie said and then added my commentary, this video would be an hour if not two. And I don't think anybody really wants that. And it's certainly not something I necessarily want to deal with. So with that in mind, we're going to speedrun this shit. I will of course put the section of the TWAB that I'm talking about on screen, and you can pause it to read it if you want to, or there'll be a link in the description below, and you can just go read it for yourself. With that out of the way, let's just get into the meat and potatoes. So Bungie addresses some global changes coming in Season 15. In Season 15, they will be introducing legendary stasis weapons. Yay! And naturally, people are concerned about this. It's almost like stasis was a mistake that they keep doubling down on, but hey, fucking details. The largest concerned group of individuals, and of course, the largest point of contention, is about primary stasis weapons that are legendary in PvP.
We're thinking a lot about how we lay the foundations for a healthier PvP game.
Or as PvE players like to call it, the no fun zone. So how will stasis weapons be pre-nerfed and clearly ruined for the no fun zone crowd? First, all stasis weapons outside of heavy weapons, which will of course obviously be in the heavy slot, will be in the kinetic slot. The reasoning behind this is because stasis won't have a damage type versus enemies, so there's no enemy stasis shields to take down. So they don't want to overcrowd the energy weapon slot, where your workhorse weapons for taking down enemy shields naturally are. This is a clever choice in my opinion. The second thing that stasis will have is a pool of stasis perks, because that's what we need more of. Not just the ability to slow and or freeze an opponent on ability and or super, but the ability to slow and or freeze an opponent now on unlimited ammo primaries. Just when you think that PvP is going to get good again, because hey, new dedicated PvP development team, anti-cheat, trials update, Bungie says, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we fucked all of that up and did something obnoxious like, IDK my BFF Jill, take Rampage. Because everybody remembers how fun Rampage on 120 hand cannons was, but instead of some bonus damage, now the more you stack it, the more debilitating the stasis effects that you can inflict on somebody else across the map will be, starting with slowing and going to freezing. That just sounds absolutely positively wonderful. Just imagine kill clip, but instead of some bonus damage, you can freeze anybody anywhere on the map or slow them, because slowing is just as annoying. But hey, details. But moving forward, they fixed the quick swap glitch and spent way too many words explaining that all primaries now have infinite ammo. Points of note to this infinite ammo buff: perks like Inertia Override have been adjusted to account for there being no primary bricks. Drop mag was reworked to be a plus to reload speed, negative to magazine size, instead of you just losing the ammo that you had left over. Compact Arrow Shaft, instead of increasing ammo reserves, it's been reworked to plus reload plus handling speed. All I have to say to that is Actium War Rig plus Sweet Business goes brrrr. In Season 15, Trials of Osiris will be receiving an update. Part of this update will apparently be the ability to target farm weapons. Hold on, wait a second, this was in a leak that also predicted the name of Season 15. Oh, look what time it is. So what did the leak say is being changed for Trials of Osiris? Take this with a grain of salt as always, but Trials overhaul loot and matchmaking, described as a more complicated version of Crypt loot system. Solo player stuff for Trials. Trials reward rework. Based on how many games played on a card, you gain an amount of tokens back when it's reset. With those tokens, you can buy engrams as well as specific loot for random rolls. Playing on 7 wins gives high chance for high stat armor as well as plus 16 stat distribution. Trials weapon ideas: Stasis Linear Fusion Rifle, Stasis Fusion Rifle. Now, of course, those were the leaks, but what did Bungie confirm? Well, targeted loot and the addition of new weapon perks, each column going from 5 perks to 7. Now, depending on these perks, that could give us more potential god roll options. On the other hand, it's also watering down the perk pools, making it harder to get god rolls. So, there is that. Next on our list, Bungie, in their continued realization that sunsetting everybody's weapons was a bad idea, realized that the way they brought them back was also a bad idea. Who would have thought that making weapons that people loved abjectly worse by taking perks from them or switching their perk trees around was a bad idea? Well, as they say, live and learn. In Season 15, the Moon and Dreaming City weapons, which lost perk rolls that define them, will have 2 to 3 of the most worthless perks removed from them, and 2 to 3 new perks added, on top of 2 of the original perks in each column being added back to these weapons. Sounds good to me. The caveat, of course, is you're going to have to regrind these weapons. But given the subject matter of Season 15, I'm gonna guess that's not that big of a problem. And now we come to archetypes. There is a note that, unless stated otherwise, exotics are also receiving these changes. And I have a note of my own. Considering we still have 2,648 words in this 6-page script, unless a weapon change is interesting, meaning good or bad, I'm probably just gonna read what the change is and move on. Breach grenade launchers. Reduce blast radius by 0.4 meters, e.g., max blast radius decreased from 4.55 meters to 4.15 meters. Min blast radius decreased from 3.8 meters to 3.4 meters. Reduce splash damage by 20, which reduces total damage for direct hits from 220 to 200, before taking spike or proximity grenades into account. Increase damage in PvE by 12%. Because of the above splash damage changes, this results in a small overall buff to combined damage. Witherhoard is unaffected. Machine gun damage increased in PvE by 20%. That's cool. There's quite a few machine guns that I'm like, oh man, I would really like to use this. Thunderlord, remember when that was good. Scout rifles and hand cannons get a 15% damage buff against miners. Neat. Hopefully no more unloading a primary weapon into an ad, just everything else. And now we come to the grand Pumbaa of changes, fusion rifles. My apparently unpopular opinion, backed up by usage data, is that fusion rifles are not a problem. In fact, in virtually all cases, legendary fusion rifles are kind of underpowered. I know what I said.
But Joker, Bastion, and Jotun!
I hear you cry out in your shrill, tremulous voices. Yeah, remember Destiny 1? Remember Thorn and Last Word? Remember how, actually, at around that time, hand cannons were kind of perfect. And yet, all hand cannons had to be nerfed because 2 problem children. Yeah, fuck that. Bastion and Jotun, as far as I'm concerned, aren't even real fusion rifles. They're exotics that break all the rules of being a fusion rifle, masquerading as fusion rifles. And even then, they're still not top 10 in usage, so it doesn't matter. And yet, people have the audacity to call them crutch weapons, which is rather perplexing given that the top of the meta actually looks like this. If you look at usage stats, you don't get to the first legendary fusion rifle until number 36. And let's not even talk about Exile's Curse and its 0.199% usage, being beaten out by weapons like Not Forgotten and Revoker, which are still in use. And yet, somehow, someway, through some Herculean leap in logic that us mere mortals will never be able to comprehend, fusion rifles are a crutch weapon in a game with Fellwinter's Lie? Really? My theory, it's the pulse rifle problem. Pulse rifle users get a lot of shit. They're called dad rifles and stuff like that. And yet, they're extremely meta. But nobody uses them because in most cases, the exotic hand cannons are just better. And it's a passive playstyle. And yet, pulse rifle users, like fusion rifle users, get a lot of hate. Because for as much as people want to bitch about shotguns and hand cannons, They seem to have a pretty negative reaction when somebody uses something other than a hand cannon or a shotgun. And that's because when somebody uses something off meta, the other players now have to adapt to playing against something that they're not used to playing, and probably don't even understand. We all know how far away Fellwinter's will hit. At least we all have kind of a feeling. You're like, yeah, I'm probably in Fellwinter's range right about now. And this is brought about by the sheer repetitiveness of fighting the weapon. But adapting to a fusion rifle, something that you may see 1 in every 100 games, that's completely different. People don't necessarily know how to adapt to that on the fly. And for a lot of people, it just fucks with them. It makes them feel robbed or cheated. What does this have to do with the price of tea in China, let alone fusion rifles? Well, Bungie's fusion rifle changes are honestly just bizarre given the current state of the meta. We'll go over them in a moment, but here's something I want you to keep in mind. Right now, fusions are, contrary to the gameplay you might be seeing, generally considered a passive weapon. The fusion that I'm using in this gameplay that you're probably maybe watching is Exile's Curse with Kickstart. Given the changes next season, this more aggressive playstyle with this fusion rifle will likely be impossible. At which point I'll probably just switch to something like a slug shotgun with a range masterwork, opening shot, an aggressive mag, and call it a day. With the changes that we see coming to movement and my prediction that Bungie is trying to slow the game down even further and has plans to do so past Season 15 into Witch Queen, it's very likely that Bungie is afraid of more passive playstyle weapons dominating the meta and bringing PvP games to a screeching halt. See D2 Year 1. Something I think is important to keep in mind as we continue. Bungie starts the fusion rifle section of this TWAB stating that fusions have benefited from the shotgun nerf. And while that may be technically true on some level, looking at the top 5 PvP weapons or even the top 10 PvP weapons and seeing 3 shotguns and 2 sniper rifles, I would argue that point. They then go on to say that fusion rifle subfamilies were not as different as they wanted. I'd again argue that these changes really don't do anything to change that, and just nerf aggressive frame fusion rifles, while making precision and adaptive the new go-to. Anyways, so all fusion rifles across the board are getting a 15% PvE buff. Previously, high impact was 0%, precision and adaptive were 10%, and rapid fire was 12.5%. High impacts charge slower, and while still strong, require more planning to use effectively. Base charge time increased from 0.86 seconds to 1 second. Shots per burst reduced from 7 to 5. Reduced total damage per burst. In playtesting, we found that charging these weapons in the open is super risky, but pre-charging around corners or otherwise in safety is very effective. With the reduced shots per burst, these are now less reliant on stability, so can stack a bit more range. So if we go back to our handy-dandy usage chart, Glacioclasm is all the way down at number 36. And Exile's Curse? All the way down in the 91st spot. One has to wonder why the actual fuck these things got nerfed. Currently, the best build for these weapons is max impact and high impact reserves, or in the case of Exile's Curse, Kickstart, which is likely a DOA build in Season 15 due to a combination of increased charge time and the nerf to slide. We'll have to see how the timing works out on that, but on paper, it doesn't look good. The reason that you use these builds was to ensure a 4-bolt kill. While these changes still allow for a 4-bolt kill, the level of forgiveness is gone. And the longer charge time, in a game that currently moves as fast as Destiny, and will move relatively just as fast in Season 15, is a death sentence to this archetype. Why would I use something that takes so long to charge up? It's the problem with fusions right now, it's why nobody uses them. Why would I use something where I have to play more passive, where I have to play a game of predictions and movement, when I can just run around, brain off, head down, fist on chest, dick in ass with a shotgun, and do way better, while putting in a tenth of the work? The only way to salvage this archetype is if each individual bolt has slightly increased damage in the high 50s, maybe even 60s. While this would still be an overall nerf to the weapon in terms of damage and forgiveness, it wouldn't leave the archetype entirely DOA, which brings us to precision and adaptive frames, who are apparently largely unchanged. Base charge time, unchanged. Shots per burst, unchanged. Very slightly increased total damage per burst. I wonder why they would put the competitively earned fusion rifle out to pasture, but then buff the Nightfall one. Whatever. Bungie goes on to state that in playtesting, they feel that these changes are very effective all around, without stepping on the niches of high impact and rapid fire. They also state, I'll be keeping a good plug one for PvP. You ever get the feeling that like buffs and nerfs happen in Destiny, not because they need to happen, but because like a developer has a pet weapon that they really like and they just buff that weapon to be good? Because that sounds kind of like what's going on here. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But on to rapid fire frame changes. Rapid fire charges faster. Base charge time decreased from 0.54 seconds to 0.46 seconds. Shots per burst increased from 7 to 9. Increased total burst damage. In playtesting, Bungie found these to be very effective against shotgun rushers. They state, and quote, the combination of them needing to be closer and you having a shorter charge time works well together, and if you have good enough timing, you can fire 2 bursts with a rapid fire before a high impact user can charge their first. Yeah, like I said, it looks like high impacts are dead and they weren't even meta to begin with. Oh well, que sera, sera. I guess I'll just use what suspiciously looks like a Bungie dev wants me to use, the easier to obtain fusion rifle from the Nightfalls. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But it wasn't just the fusion rifles that got changed, some of the perks did as well. Backup Plan removes the plus 100 charge time to stat and adjusts charge time multiplier from 0.85 to 0.7. and now scales damage by 0.8. Liquid coils and accelerated coils both convert to scale charge time and damage instead of modifying these stats. According to Bungie, the Adept charge time mod felt pointless, so they changed its functionality to scale the charge time directly instead of changing the charge time stat without adjusting the damage. Charge time masterwork. Before, no one used it because it hurt the damage. Now they feel like it won't hurt the damage as often, so it might be worth taking. All in all, for as much as I seemingly complained about the nerf to high impact because it's kinda dumb when you look at the numbers, this really isn't going to change anything as far as your day-to-day PvP goes because according to those very same numbers, nobody is using fusion rifles anyways. So, on to exotics. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, I have gathered you here today to pay your respects. The king is dead. Long live the king. Anarchy got nerfed into the ground. Reduced total reserve plus magazine ammunition from 26 to 16. Reduced damage by 30% versus bosses. Champions are not bosses, so there's some consolence for those of you who, well, hate this nerf. Xenophage, reduced rate of fire from 120 to 90 rounds per minute. Receives less of the machine gun PvE damage buff. Fighting Lion reserve ammo increased from a lot to infinite. Received the same changes as other breach grenade launchers. Reduce base reload stat to 0. Breach grenade launchers with 0 reload stat reload very, very slowly. Perk now increases reload speed to its previous level on damaging multiple enemies with 1 grenade. Vex Mythoclass. PvE damage bonus increased by 40%. Range stat increased to be near best in class for high impact auto rifles. Increased stability stat. Reworked catalyst to grant stability and damage after a kill. Increased rate of fire from 360 to 390. Reduced linear fusion mode charge time from 820 to 533. Same as standard linear fusion rifles. No longer loses overcharge stacks when stowed, except when in linear fusion rifle mode. Merciless, updated perk to account for fewer shots per burst. Should build up charge rate at the same amount per burst as before. Reduce the damage penalty for increased charge rate
by 40%. You know what? Speaking of exotic fusion rifles, given the ass blasting that high-impact fusion rifles received, I wonder what happened to the actual problem children. Jotun reduced charge time from 0.82 seconds to 0.78 seconds, i.e., charges 0.04 seconds faster. Okay, thanks for the math. Jotun slightly reduced damage per shot. I mean, they did something, but realistically, now it's just a faster charging tracking cross-map OHK with maybe slightly less damage per shot, but if it's still an OHK, then this is a buff. Bastion reduced damage by 15%, can now not quite kill a Guardian with one shot of the 3-shot burst it fires. Increased spread angle by 10%. Increase PvE damage by 25%, so all around a 10% buff in PvE. So basically nothing, you've just got to get a little bit closer and land more of your shots. Shots you were going to land anyways. Okay, it is what it is. Sweet Business. Sweet Business's perk of refilling the magazine when picking up primary ammo no longer works in a world without primary ammo, so has been adjusted. Now refills magazine on picking up special and heavy ammo instead of primary. That is still kind of a nerf, but what are you gonna do? Perks. Firing line. Reduced damage bonus plus 20% precision damage on all supported weapon archetypes. Certain damage perks only affected impact damage on explosive weapons. We've updated these specific perks so they increase detonation damage. Kill Clip, Rampage, and Adrenaline Junkie. Bungie also fixed the incorrect rarities on some recently shipped weapon perks. So I guess that confirms that we have rarity on top of RNG on top of RNG on top of rarity. Wonderful. Guns, guns, guns. You know the drill, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages. A bunch of sunset weapons will return. Season of the Lost, Season of the Redacted, will have its own weapons, and we get a new Pursuit rocket launcher that comes with explosive light. This was Wendigo's perk, so that could be fun. They've also brought in a selection of Trials of the 9 weapons and put them in the Prophecy Dungeon. Yeah, I'm just going to take out my handy dandy Season 15 and Witch Queen Leaks bingo card that I found this morning and check off another item. All in all, it's a usual set of Destiny patch notes. Some good, some bad, and a lot of more of the same. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. But above all else, stay frosty.